Good evening. Welcome to Friday night's video. This series is a short series on basic structures. I posted videos the last two Fridays. The first video was on intervals, the degree system, and the chromatic scale and the notes on the fretboard. Then on the following Friday we talked about scales, their relation to the interval system and the degree system, and we talked about key and how key is directly related to the system of notes and their names, and how those two systems are separate systems that are integrated together to form the system that is, well, the integrated system that is a combination of them both. So we talked about that. I made it very easy to show you on the fretboard how to create them, how to move them around, how to identify them, how to understand those systems and how they function and what their purpose is. We didn't talk a whole lot about their purpose because I just wanted you to understand the basic system. I didn't want to get into a bunch of theoretical concepts. We just wanted to talk about the basic building blocks themselves. And we talked about modes. We talked about a couple different ways that modes can be seen and how you can interpret what a mode is. And I showed you some simple starting mode positions on the guitar and what that meant and the pattern system, so that you'd have a starting point as far as having at least an understanding of the first 7 modes in the major scale and a good basic way to play each 7 of them according to the starting interval, depending on what interval you started with and the name of those modes. So we're ready to move on to the next basic structure, which is chordial patterns, chordial structures. And we're talking about 2-note harmonies, 3-note triads, and actual larger chordial structures, anything more than 3 notes. And we'll get into the basics of that. The first understanding that I want you to understand before we start is the basic harmonies. There's 12 chromatic tones. So if you could put 2 notes together, that only leaves 6 possible harmonies, and they're inverted. So let's say, for an example, is that you have like a minor second harmony. It inverted is a 6th harmony. It's the exact same harmony except for it's got a different root, but they're the same exact harmony. So it's a real simple concept to get in your head, so to help you remember the harmonies if possible on the guitar, because there are only 6 of them, and their inversion is the other possible 6 harmonies, but they're actually the same harmony. Then we get into triads. Triads are a little bit different. There's some basic triads that you really need to work on. It's argumentable how many different triads you could possibly make, but my recommendation, the ones I'm going to show you, is we're going to talk about the major, the minor, the augmented, the diminished, and the sustained triads. There is root on the bottom, and I recommend that you learn root on the bottom from the 6th string, the 5th string, and the 4th string, and from the 3rd string. And there's 2 other inversions with triads, root on the top, 1st inversion, and root on the middle, 2nd inversion. I wouldn't worry about them till you get a little bit more advanced, but we will talk about them a little bit. But the basic triads there, and like that, you will find it's not that difficult to learn those triads, at least those 4 of them, those 5 of them, and basic root on the bottom on those strings. That way it will help you a lot. And after that, we're going to talk about chords. And basically, you've got major, minor, augmented, diminished, half diminished, 6th, minor 6th, dominant 7ths, major 7ths, and minor 7ths, 9ths, minor 9ths, and sustained chords. Those are the primary chords that you need to learn. Almost all other chords are built from those or from some of the other triads combined together. And if you learn those, I recommend learning each one of those chords from the 6th string, the 5th string, and the 4th string. That way you have a little bit of flexibility on the tonation and the tonalities of the chord. There's inversions of them and all kinds of things. We're not going to get into that. That can get very advanced. And as you play, you may find that you go and find one of those chords that work, and you may want it to be inverted for some reason, like you want a little bit brassier because of its chord. You're playing with an acoustic guitar or with an acoustic and a bass guitar, or the other guitarist is really, got a really low tone set on his guitar, and so you want it brassier, so you want to invert it for the root on the top and move it higher up the fretboard or something. There's reasons why you might want to do that, but for now, let's just say that's something you can get into later when you get into some advanced theory and experimentation that takes you out of the realm of the basics that you need to understand. There you will find there's all kinds of things that you can do with the basic structures and basic theoretical structures we've been talking about, and same goes for these basic chordal and harmony structures. But we don't want to get too deep in it and have 12 4-hour videos on this, because you will find once you take flight with this that will just kind of come as you play and as you improvise, as you compose, and as you experiment around. So those are the basic things you need to understand, and that's what we're going to discuss. So in this video, we are first going to talk about harmonies, then we're going to talk about triads, and then we're going to talk about the basic chords that you need to learn. And it's not that much. These are basic structures, so it might sound like a lot, but if you spend a little bit of time learning it, these are some of the basic things you need to learn. That way you don't get confused by a lot of other stuff that's theoretical conjecture. Does that make sense? These are the basic building blocks you have to work with, and you should find, if you understand these chordal and these harmony concepts and you understand them well, and it's not that much to learn, that you will find that it's very unlikely that most of you will roam too far away from that kind of stuff unless you really get into some in-deep theory, or you become one of those theoretician kind of guitarists that just always want to try something new all the time, something off the wall, or something just totally strange. What can I do with this chord that's really cool or strange or weird, or where can I play it that's just strange, or add to it that's weird, or it might be really, really kind of cool, but just, messing around, and one of those kind of people does that. If not, your mind's you will use these chordal structures to focus on the more important aspect of, creation. And as you create, if you run out of space on those, then you can start experimenting in that arena also. But for a while, don't worry about it. These are the foundations that you need to understand so that you got a very good understanding of the chordal structures, that part of the foundation of music theory, so that as you progress and as you learn and as you become a better musician and a better guitarist, that as your experiments will have a good firm foundation in the fundamentals, so that you can experiment with those fundamentals and expand upon them and not get lost in, what could be possible, because you already know all the basic components of the music theory concept in Western music. So there's not like something out there that's some kind of mystery. There's things you can do, but none of it's a mystery anymore. Does that make sense? So stay tuned for a minute. We are going to pull out a fretboard, and we are going to take a look at these concepts on a fretboard, so that we can better analyze them and visualize them. And you can take some snapshots and and some notes or whatever to remember them. But you can also file the video away if you would like, download the video, or get a hold of me and to review it and things like that. And trust me, it's not that much. The basic chordal structures and harmonies aren't that much, and they're next building block that you as a guitarist and as a musician need to understand. So I will see you in a few minutes after we pull out a fretboard. Okay, so we're going to talk about first just the basic harmonies. So before we talk about the basic harmonies, one thing I wanted to show you is that you can make a snapshot of this, or get a piece of paper that has the interval system from the root on somewhere, and have it to look at whenever you're dealing with chordal structures. It can be very helpful depending on where you're placing the root and what type of chordal structure you are, because there's been you may eventually run into an issue trying to remember what interval is going to what direction, from where, and all of them. That takes time, so just be kind of leery of that. I'm really more concerned about you learning most of the chordal structures from root on the bottom, and root from well, you'll see as I showed you some more advanced chordal triads and other structures as far as more advanced chords, 4-note chords, and anything up above that. So, but anyway, when we're talking about harmonies, we've got a couple things going on here. First of all, we understand the integral system and degree system, and I showed you it this way, going root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, back one octave up, using the major scale and the major key to show you how the interval system and degree system is put together. So when we look at this, we want to look at this in the chromatic scale. There is basically 6 harmonies and their inversions, which are basically the same harmony. You know, if we have like a minor, we have a 6th harmony is basically a minor 3rd harmony. So let's take a look at that concept, because basically we're looking like from here, from root to this major 7th, that's a 7th harmony. Now if we invert that, that is going to be a flat 9th. So basically what we're looking at is that would be, if you look at this 7th here, this would be that same interval. So it's a half step up to that first interval. So basically it's a flat 2nd harmony because it's only a half step up. So it'd be like root to the flat 2nd. Now anything up above 8 is going to get more numbers on it, because this is 7th, 1 octave up would be 1 again, but it's actually the 8th interval. So going up above that, if you go to this 2nd interval 1 octave up, it's going to be a 9th. So anytime you hear you talking about that 2nd interval, really, you might hear 13ths and stuff like that, but really remember the 9ths basically directly related to, it's the flat 2nd interval. Normally talking about the flat 2nd interval as far as a harmony with the first interval, and normally it's at least an octave above an octave up. Does that make sense? But it's that harmony between the first and 2nd interval, but they'll call it a 9th because it's at least above an octave above the first interval, and so they'll go 8, 8.5, or flat or sharp 8 or flat 9th, and then 9th. Does that make sense? So remember, keep that in mind. So when we're going to this root to flat 7th, there's that same flat 7th a half step down, an octave down below it, because we had talked about an octave up. So its inversion is only a half step, or in that harmony. So from the first to the flat 7th, that's only a half step harmony if you bring that an octave down. That concept's really easy to understand, to really help you understand when we talk about the rest of the harmonies. Because this 7th harmony, if I invert it and I make this the root, it's going to be the flat, it's going to be the sharp first. So it would be root to this sharp first, or flat 2nd, flat 9th. Does that make sense? And that would be the harmony. It would be the same thing if you go from here. This is the root 3rd, 5th, the major triad we've talked about, but you'd be going down to this flat 2nd. There would be a flat 9th harmony, root to flat 9th. So root to flat 9th is basically root a 7th harmony inverted is a flat 9th harmony. So that's a very simple concept to get in your head. And if we go to root to flat 7th, this flat 7th harmony is actually a 9th inverted, correct? Because it would be going to root to the 2nd interval. So because if you drop down that 1 octave down, it's the flat 7th, the minor 7th. So it's going to be root to 9th, right? Well, because you've got that, if you invert that and you go to there, it's going, instead of being root to flat 7th, it's going to be root to 2nd. So it's actually the flat 7th interval and the flat 7th harmony inverted is the 9th harmony. So if you're talking about a 9th inverted, it's a flat 7th harmony. So then we go to the 6th. So if you go root to 6th, and if we look at these from the interval to here, here's the 6th as we learned the interval system I taught you how to see it. There's the 6th interval, but it's the same note up here. So if I'm playing this harmony, this root to 6th, inverted, it's a flat 3rd, correct? So inverted, it's a flat 3rd. So if we take this root and we say the 6th is the root, and this would be the 2nd note of the harmony, it is going to be a flat 3rd. All right, so it's a minor 3rd harmony. That would be right here. Does that make sense? It would be root to flat 3rd. Does that make sense? So that's a very simple concept to get in your heads, that 6th harmony inverted is a flat 3rd, but the same harmony. It's got the same tonal characteristics. So you come to the next one, and you go to the flat sixth. The flat sixth harmony inverted is a major third. So if you decide to put this flat sixth harmony, which is also here, flat sixth, root to flat sixth, that inverted is going to be root to third. So if you look at it really carefully, it's like if we look at this root to sixth, that harmony inverted using this in the root and going to the first, if you've got this in the root and that separation, that's a flat third harmony. Now if we go root to flat sixth, or augmented fifth, root to flat sixth, and that inversion, if you use this to the root to first, that's a major third harmony, because if you look at that to there, root this from the flat fifth back to this fifth to the root one note, that's a major third. And you can visualize that from here, coming back to this root and seeing the third from the root. So, root to flat sixth inverted is a major third harmony. So the major third harmony is a flat sixth, and a sixth harmony is actually a third. All right, so do you remember that? Now, if we come to fifth, one of the things about a fifth, we'll look at it over here. Here's root to fifth, all right, because we learned the interval system like that to easier visualize it. Now, if this goes root to fifth, that goes root to fifth like that, inverted, it's going to be root to fourth. All right, it's going to be a fourth harmony, because the understanding of that is if you take this root, you go root to fifth, that's a fifth harmony, and if you invert it, that would be going from this fifth to the root, right? So you just look up above it, and that's a root to fourth, because you can go back here to where you started from and go the note up above it. The interval in harmony would be a fourth. So the fifth harmony inverted is the fourth harmony. So if you've got a fourth and you're singing a fourth harmony, a fifth harmony is the exact same harmony, it's just inverted. Does that make sense? But it basically sounds the exact same. So now if we go to a tritone, it's going to be that you're going to go root to the augmented fourth or diminished fifth, the tritone we talked about. Now it inverted, if we invert it, we go root to the tritone, or we go tritone to the root, it's the same. It's the same separation, and it would be the same thing below. Does that make sense? Because this is one octave down. We know that from here, seeing this is one octave down. So if we go up here and inverted, so you've got it like that. So you go root to fourth, the augmented fourth or diminished fifth, the tritone. So it inverted is that tritone, this root, back to the root, which is from here to here. So inverted is the same tritone harmony. They sound exactly the same whichever way you do them. So now you've covered all the intervals from the first interval, the flat second, or at the flat second we were calling the flat ninth, the second we were calling the ninth, the flat third, the fourth, the augmented fourth and diminished fifth, the fifth, the flat sixth, the flat seventh, and the seventh. From any one of those intervals to any of the other intervals, we've talked about them and their inversions. And there are basically 6 of them, and then inverted is basically the other 6 notes. Does that make sense? So it's a very simple concept to get in your head and to understand those harmonies and experiment around with them. And understanding there's only 6 of them, it can be very helpful when you're messing around, that you can quickly invert it to have some lower notes or higher notes to work with and things like that. And that's a very simple concept to understand. Those are the 12 harmonies in the 12-note chromatic scale, which boils down to actually 6 harmonies and then an inversion of them that covers all of them. And it's that simple. It don't get it any more complicated than that. And let us move on to triads. Now, triads can be one of the things about triads, let me move my picture over here, because one of the things about triads is there's 2 inversions. So you have root on the bottom. Let's say this is a major triad. You've got root on the bottom, root on the top, and root in the middle. So, I mean, the root can be on the bottom one, it can be the top one, or it can be the middle note, depending on which inversion you're using. Now, the issue with that can be some guitarists get real upset down and want to learn all these inversions. Don't worry about that. Learn the basic ones, the major, minor, augmented, diminished, and sustained triads from root on the bottom. And I'm going to go through them here and show them to you on these different strings. So from the 6th string, there's the triad, the major triad, root to the third major third interval to the 5th interval. You got the minor triad, which is root to the minor third to the 5th interval. You've got the augmented triad, which is root to the major third to the augmented 5th interval. Then you have the diminished triad, which is root to the minor third to the diminished 5th, flat 5th interval. And then you have the sustained triad. So you have root to the 4th interval to the 5th interval. That's not that much to get to understand. Now, if you can go back and write those down, memorize them, or take snapshots or whatever. Hopefully I showed them there long if you just take some snapshots. That's not that much to learn to understand the basic major, minor, augmented, diminished, and sustained triads. So those are the basic ones you need to know and understand. Those are some of your basic building blocks. Now, I try to get you to learn them from these ones from the 6th string, 5th, 4th, 3rd string. Okay, so I'm going to go through these really quick so you can take some snapshots. It's not that bad and they're not that difficult to learn. You just practice them a little bit. They're your basic structures, but just knowing what that is and knowing the intervals that compose them, you can always pull out an interval system on a fretboard and look at it really quick to see what you're trying to do. But let's just look at them real quick, because if I go to here, that's root from the 6th string. This is root from the 5th string. This is root from the 4th string. This is root from the 3rd string. So that's the major triad, going root, major, 3rd, 5th. Alright, so that's the major ones. Then we go to the minor ones. You have root from the 6th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th, and root from the 1st. That's your minor triads. Okay, so then we go to augmented. That's root from the 6th string, root from the 5th, root from the 4th, root from the 3rd. Those are your augmented triads. Then we'll go to diminished. That's root from the 6th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th, and root from the 3rd. Those are your diminished triads. Then we'll come to the suspense chords. Sustain, root from the 6th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th, and root from the 3rd. Those are your sustained triads. Okay, so now you've got a basic understanding of at least those triads from those places. And why I say to learn it from there, because that way you've got the fretboard covered. It's not that much. So if you want to hang tough for just a second, I'm going to show you the other ones before we get to the other chordal structures, so that anybody who was wanting to learn them in their inversions, that they can learn them in their inversions. So basically, I want to come to here. I want to go to group 2. Now this is root on the top. So you got root, 3rd, 5th. Okay? So I'm going to go through these. Now you can have these come starting from the 4th string, because that will be the root, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. So that's from the 4th string, from the 3rd string, the major triad, from the 2nd string, and from the 1st string. Okay, so then we come to the minor triad, root on the top. Then this is the first inversion. Then you go root, that's from the 4th string root, 3rd string root, 2nd string root, 1st string root. Okay, so that's the minor triad, first inversion. Then we come to the augmented triad, first inversion. You've got root starting from the 4th string, root from the 3rd, root from the 2nd, root from the 1st. So that's the augmented, root on top. Then we've got diminished root on top. This is from the 4th string, 3rd string, 2nd string, 1st string. Okay, then we come to the sustain. This is root on top, first inversion, from 4th string, 3rd string, 2nd string, first string. Okay, so those are those ones from those inversions from the first inversion. Now if we go to the third group, your root in the middle. You'll find a lot of major bar chords are played like this, and you'll see this later when we start talking about. There's root from the fifth string, major, this is the major triad, root from the fifth string, root from the fourth string, because it goes root, third, fifth. Does that make sense? So then you got root from the third string, root from the second string. Alright, so that's major. We go to minor, root from the fifth string, root from the fourth string, root from the third string, root from the second string. That's minor. Then we come to augmented, root in the middle, second inversion. So you got root from the fifth, root from the fourth, root from the third, root from the second. Alright, so that is augmented. We got diminished, root in the middle, or second inversion, from the fifth string, from the fourth string, from the third string, from the second string. Alright, so that's diminished. Then we go to sustain. We got root in the middle from the fifth string, from the fourth, from the third, and from the second. Okay, so now that was the root from the bottom, the first primary triads. Then you had root from the top, which is first inversion. Then you had root in the middle, which is second inversion of all those primary triads. So let's learn the first ones that I had showed you. Learn those, at least that's so you understand those basic structures and at least where to play them on those strings from the sixth, the fifth, the fourth, and the third. And the inversions are there. You can make a copy of this video or whatever. Those inversions are great because I've learned that sometimes, like let's say I play like this, I play this major triad from here, right? Well, if I go up here and I invert it and I put the root one octave up from here, and then I play that first inversion triad, root on the top. So the root on the top is root on the top, then third and fifth, right? Correct? So that, it's got a different tonality. It sounds different. I mean, you can actually play one right after the other, playing some kind of compositions, and it actually sounds cool because all of a sudden you sit and you play this inverted triad or something, and it adds a whole lot of different texture to whatever you're playing in improvisations or compositions. It really does. So keep that in mind, but don't get all flustered about it. You got to learn all those inversions or something. Just there they are. When you get to the point that you want to learn, they're not that difficult. There's three intervals in them, and the root is on the bottom, or it's at the top, or it's in the middle, and it's that simple. It's not that complicated. And so that is the basic triads that you want to learn, and I explained to you which ones. Root from the bottom, at least learn those from those strings, and it's not that difficult. The pattern isn't that difficult for you to remember, and just make a note of them, write them out, or take some snapshots of them, make a collage or whatever, and learn those. Those are the second chordal structures that you should be concerned with, so that you understand the basic harmony and chordal structures that are foundations in music theory in Western Hemisphere or Western arena. So let's go on to chords. Next, we'd be talking about chordal structure would be more than 3 chords. So the first one that we want to look at, there's a couple of ones. Major and minor we looked at as triads also. Augmented and diminished also. This one on here is the diminished seventh. So we'll talk about, when you see me talking about this diminished, this on here, the chordal structure, it's a diminished seventh that has 4 tones in it. And so just understand it's not the exact same as the 3-tone triad diminished. It has an added tone to it, but it's a very important chord. So you have these chords to learn. The major, the minor, the augmented diminished, the half diminished, the major sixth, the minor sixth, the dominant seventh, the major seventh, the minor seventh, the ninth, the minor ninth, and the sustain chord. You already know the triads for the major and minor, augmented and diminished, and for the sustain, because they're basic triadal structures that you need to know for their basic foundations. Now these are in more of a chordal, and I'm showing you these in a bar chord form because it's the best way to initially learn them. Later on, as you want, because when you learn the triads, you understand those basic structures. Later on, you start experimenting with inversions and adding notes to that. You'll come up with all kinds of really weird chords, and you bar chords, adding to them and things like that. You've got, with those understandings and why I teach you these chordal structures this way, that way you've got a good bar chord understanding from root going up the fretboard, and with the basic triads, you got a good understanding of the basic structures from root going down the fretboard. Does that make sense? And as you get better and as you improvise, you may add notes to it, add-ons to it, or create seventh chords from triads, you know, because the structure is going down the fretboard rather than up the fretboard in like a bar chord. So there are two different ways to play it. You're going up from the root or you're going down from the root. And you can go through learn all these chords you want from triad position if you want. Later on, as you get better, that way that I've learned that not to go there, because the bar chord gets represented a lot in the guitar. If you'll get a lot of, it's very easy to relate what's happening besides just the triadal structures. So anyway, let's take a look at these. These basically, the first concept that I want you to understand, I want you to learn these from the 6th string root, root on 6th, root on the 5th, and root on the 4th. It's not that much, and I'm going to go through the structures so you can understand them and visualize them, take pictures, make a montage again, and so that you can understand that. But the basic understanding on all these is understand the structure, how it's formulated from root on the 6th string. That means remember on the triads and on these chords, really understand the interval separation and how it's formed from root on the 6th. Does that make sense? As you move it up to different strings, you'll understand the concept better. It's easier to move it around. You get a good primary understanding from visualizing it from root on the 6th string. So remember that and try to learn it that way. So let's take a look at these chordal structures. First, we've got the major. All right, and this is the major. You've got the root, the 5th. You've got the root doubled again. You got a major 3rd, the 5th doubled again, and the root doubled again. That's the major bar chord, and the intervals that you know from looking at major triad, that the root, the major 3rd, and the 5th are the major tonalities of that, and they're just doubled in here. A couple of them are the root and the 5th. So that's the major bar chord from the 6th string. This is the major bar chord from the 5th string using the root on the 5th. This is the major bar chord or the major chord. Not always a bar chord, so it's not always you got a bar across there, but I can refer to it like a bar chord. And that's root from the 4th string, and the intervals that are significant in there. So then we go to the minor chord. Now the minor chord that you remember, I'm not going to do this on every one of the chords, but you've got the root, the flat 3rd, the minor 3rd, and the 5th. So you got the root from the 6th string, the root from the 5th string, and the root from the 4th string. Now that's the minor chord. So, and we're trying to see it as bar chords. That way your initial understanding of it is from this perspective. There's a reason for that, and you'll understand that as you progress and as you get better. Why? You can always refer back to the basic bar chord structures or triads to try to work things out when you run into theory and compositional issues. So then next we go to, this is the augmented. So now this augmented is going from root. I'll normally show you, I don't worry about you doubling this one so much. It's these ones here that are most important. And this is the structure. So you've got, we're talking about a bar chord, but we're kind of doubling some notes to get a fuller sound on this augmented chord. So you've got this augmented from the 1st, from the 5th, and from the 4th. Now on this one, just remember the first 4 notes are the most important to remember. And then we come up to the next one, and we're talking about, this is the diminished 7th I was talking about. So the diminished 7th in it has the root, the diminished 5th, the 6th, and the minor 3rd in it. So this is an important diminished chord you need to know as a structure. This is root from the root from the 6th, root from the 5th, and root from the 4th. So then we come to the half diminished. This is important structure. It's a very interesting chord, and it's very important in the major scale as the 7th interval basic chord, chordial structure for that, for the basic chords that go on each interval in the major key. So we've got root, flat 5th, flat 7th, and flat 3rd. That's root from the 6th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th. Now we come to this major 6th. This is just the 6th chord. Now this is a little more difficult. Some of these are hard to do. On this one, you can also do this, like if you look here, this can also be played. If you go to here, this 6th is going to actually be up here also. So the understanding of that is that when you're playing this 6th up here, that on one of these notes, because if you go over here, I don't know if it'll come back to it or not. I don't know if it'll come back to it. So anyway, I'm not even going to get into that. Let me see if I can show it on here like. No, it's not going to show it like that. All right, there's another way to play it with the 6th up here. You can play the 6th up here as this chordal structure being the 6th here, so you're hitting just the root, the 5th, the 3rd, and the 6th here. But this is the basic 4-tone structure that's good to learn. He's got the root, the 5th, the 6th, and the 3rd. Now that's root from the 6th string, root from the 5th string, and root from the 4th string. That is the 6th chord. Then you come to the minor 6th. You just drop the 3rd to a flat 3rd, root from the 6th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th. Then we come to the 7th chord, the dominant 7th chord. It's got a root, 5th, flat 7th, and a major 3rd in it. This is root from the 6th, root from the 5th, and root from the 4th. And then we're talking about the dominant 7th chord. Now we're going to talk about the major 7th. So the root major 7th is going to the root, the 5th, the major 7th interval, and the major 3rd. So that's root from the 6th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th. And that's your major 7th. So then we go on to minor 7th. This got the root, 5th, flat 7th, and flat 3rd interval in it. You got root from the 6th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th. Then we come to the 9th. So this is root from the 6th. You got first interval, 3rd interval, flat 7th, and the 2nd interval, which would be this interval, but up here is basically looked at as the 9th interval because it's up above. Up to here, this is 1 octave up from the 1st interval. Anything up above that, this is 8. Right? So this would be, because it's flat 7th, this would be 7th, this would be the 8th interval, anything above that. So this is actually the 9th interval, but it's up above the 8th interval, so it gets a different name. We'll talk about that more later. So those intervals in that is root from the 6th, the 9th, root from the 5th, root from the 4th. And that's your basic 9th chord. Then you come to the minor 9th, you just drop the major 3rd to a minor 3rd. That's root from the 6th, root from the 5th, and root from the 4th. And that's your minor chords. So then we come to the sustain. This is root, you have the root, the 5th, and the 4th in that. You remember from the triad. So that's root from the 6th string, root from the 5th string, and root from the 4th string. And that's your sustain chords. Alright, so those are the basic chords that we're looking at. So with those basic chords, they're not all bar chords, but they are the best basic starting point that I've found for most people. I can get them to learn those. that, you know, if I can get them to learn those triads from the root on the bottom and those basic chords, at least from the 6th string, then most of them find they're doing pretty good. Once they understand that, if they learn those, the harmonies we talked about, and understand those 6 harmonies and their inversions, so that they understand, they experiment around a little with it, because once they understand that, it'll cause some experimentation, and they start going, wow, a minor third and harmony in inverted is actually a 6th. What is that? Where's that interval separation? It started causing some thinking, you know, that they're experimenting with the harmonies happening, and they really start to understand what those harmonies are. And it starts working on their vocal and their compositions, and it starts helping them in all kinds of areas. And second, with the triads, learning those basic triads. Knowing what the basic triads that you need to understand from, and knowing at least root on the bottom on this 6th string and understanding of that interval pattern, at least that they've got a pretty good understanding of those basics. And as they start trying to move them around, that it is very helpful for them in understanding that. And same thing with the chords, just at least understanding these basic chords from the 6th string. From root on the 6th string. I recommended, like I said, I showed you what I recommended that you learned. I mean, set it out as a program to get down. You'll understand. Once you get it down and you memorize it, once a month you just might go through it, you know, and just kind of refresh your memory on those inversions and try the chords in different areas. And that you'll find that it's really helpful you to have this good solid foundation of those building blocks, because almost all other chordal structures are going to be built from those harmonies, those triads, or those basic chords that I've just showed you. And it might seem like a lot, but if you actually just write it out or save this video and go through them, start spending some time, that it's one of these foundations that's really going to help you as you're progressing, because some of the things you hear and you listen to and you mess around with, that it'll start to make more sense to you with a better understanding of these foundations. So that's basically all I want to throw at you for the basic structures. So the basic chordal structures and harmonies that you need to understand exist and to memorize, so that you understand those basic harmonies, those basic triads, and those basic chords are some of the most fundamental building blocks you have to work with when dealing with chordal structures. And if you can remember those and have a good understanding of those, what intervals are that they're comprised of, and some of their basic forms that I've showed you, that you're doing pretty good. You got a pretty good understanding of the chordal structure, what that means. You start out with one note, you've got the harmonies, you've got the basic triads, then you've got some 4-note structures that are the next step up. Because if you look even like here, if we go to like this diminished 7th, well, you've got the root, the flat 5th, and the flat 3rd, right? So what was that? That was the diminished triad we're looking at. So you're just adding another interval to it, this 6th, that's making it this diminished 7th, right? So it's a really cool concept to understand that these basic structures, that you've went from the basic concept of a harmony. You've got the basic concept of one single note. You got the basic concept of the most primary fundamental harmonies, which is a minor third. And you've taken that minor third harmony and you've turned it into a triad, first of all, by adding a flat 5th, which has made it a diminished chord. Now you've added one other interval, which is this 6th, which has turned this into a diminished 7th. And at each stage, the tonalities are different. Now, I know that sounds stupid. If somebody's saying that, somebody might go, well, that's stupid. Of course it does. You know, but the concept and letting it sink in of what those foundations are, as you start stacking them on top of each other, what happens? Does that make sense? And the concept of even taking a chord like this and really listening to the change in the tonal structure. Just play the root, then play that minor third together and listen to it for a little while. Then play that diminished triad for a little bit and listen to the tonal changes. What kind of textures and change in the texture of the sound has changed. And then add in that 6th to it, to where it's a diminished 7th. And really spend some time strumming it and listening to it and listening to the tonal texture change that is happening by each addition that you add from the first primary tone that you started with. And you really start to understand the amazing thing that is. Does that make sense? And that's the basic foundations getting built upon to build more complex structures, which is a really cool concept, and hopefully explained like that, it makes so much more sense. Now you get into more advanced concepts that from that point, anything added on to that, that's getting into some complex chords. I mean, it just is, and anything that's getting more than 4 notes in it, that you're getting into a pretty complex chord. You just are. So, and you being able to understand the interval system, what's happening there, now you can probably break anything you run into down to one of those basic structures, one of those basic composite of intervals. When I say composite of intervals, it's like the diminished seventh, the diminished seventh, or the half diminished chord, that it's, you understand these basic intervals. It's the basic primary note with the minor third added to it, with that flat fifth added to it, which basically is a minor triad, or no, I'm sorry, because it would be the fifth, with that flat fifth added to it, and that tritone, and then added that flat seventh. So with you understanding those basic intervals that it's comprised of, that as you add more tones to that, it becomes a much more complex chord. So you may eventually find that you stay away from really complex chords or experimentations that are more than 4 notes. Maybe you might add another 5th note to that. But, once you really understand those basic structures, the harmonies, the triads, and those basic chords, it's really unlikely you're going to dig around. Every now and then you might add another note to that to just add some kind of textural flavor to something that's happening. But you'll probably find that it's more than enough to fill out your composition. And you'll find other ways to fill in that space with the bass player, with the vocalist, with the keyboardist, if you're comprising or if you're composing, that you're not going to worry about too much of that on the guitar, because one of those other instruments can fill in that space to give it sonic fullness. Does that make sense? Rather than you trying to fill all the sonic realm on the guitar, that you're not trying to fill up every bit of sonic space. It's very simple that the guitar can be playing the root, the keyboardist can be playing the flat fifth, the bass player can be playing the flat seventh, and the vocalist can be singing a flat third, and you've got 3-4 different instruments that are filling in that chordal structure. And it's a really cool concept because it really helps in your understanding of, as you compose and as you do things, that you as a guitarist don't always have to fill in everything. Leave some of it for the bass player, leave some of it for the keyboard player, leave some of it for the vocalist, leave space for them, leave sonic space for them. The chordal structure gets completely filled out by them being in the group, because they are going to fill in some of those areas. Does that make sense? And your job is to fill in your area. That way, because the more that you try to fill in every dang thing, the more muddy it gets. The less you do and you let everybody else have a space, that then it becomes a much more definitive and clear composition and piece of music that you listen to, because other instruments are using parts of this chord to fill out that harmony structure. Does that make sense? So each one of them has its own tonal qualities. The guitar is distorted, the bass is really bassy and got a little buzz thing on it. The keyboardist has got this, orchestral sound on it. And the vocalist, sounds like, Whitney Houston, so they all got different sonic textures. And as those different sonic textures combine together to create chordal structures, it's another huge concept to get in your head whenever you're messing around with that and composing. It's a huge concept. So, but those are the basic chordal structures that we wanted to talk about, and the importance of understanding them, so that this next step of your theoretical understanding, the basic building blocks. All other theory, we'll get into some other stuff later, but you will find these basic building blocks are going to be the most important things you learn as a musician and as a guitarist as you progress. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you've got a pretty good understanding of the triads, the basic harmonies, the basic triads, and the basic chordal structures that you need to understand. And even with the triads and the basic chords, at least from the 6th string, to understand those structures. And then as you have time, learn them like I showed you to at least have a pretty good foundation. Anything you do different than that as you progress that you will find may have to do with a couple different things. The style or genre that you are addressing might want you to play certain types of chords structured in certain ways to get certain types of sounds that is, inherent in that type of music or style or genre. And just for personal taste in your improvisations and things like that, certain types of chords that you really like, that are comfortable for you, that you play a certain way, that sound good, and that will develop in time. But I've found out these are my foundations that I goes to in my compositions and in my improvisations, to have a basic, to always be able to quickly be able to get to the basic structures I need to. And then if it's something more advanced than that, then I have to try to figure out what's going on there, or, add to it or something like that. So that's the basic chordal structures and what you need to understand the next building block in fundamental music theory. And we've just discussed that, being the chordal structures. I certainly hope you enjoyed the video. I certainly hope you watch it 2, 3, 5 times, make some notes and take some snapshots until you understand that. And feel free to ask me any questions, but those are the next basic building blocks you need to understand. Next week, we're going to talk about the basic understandings of progressions and the basic understandings of tonal chords, and a couple systems for you to make a note of so that you can very simply relate to those systems and structures and be able to utilize them on the fretboard very easily, very quickly. And at that point, we're going to go to talk about articulations. And then more than likely, we're going to have some fun just talking about some abstract theory after that, because for the most part, we got most of the basic building blocks. There's a couple other things I want to talk about, but we'll just see how next week's video go and how far we get with articulations and how long that video becomes. So peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you have made some notes of this, saved this video, and really understand the next primary building blocks in music theory in the Western arena. Peace, hope, love. See you next Friday's video.